Welcome back to another episode of Her Expat Life. We are the YouTube channel that is dedicated to bringing female entrepreneurs, expats, digital nomads, and business developers the opportunity to explore a global workforce, a global lifestyle, and offering support in this path and journey. And today we are going to be speaking to Natalia Ivanova, who is the CEO and founder of New Gen Wealth Creation, to discuss a topic that has been quite pertinent in the news lately. Lots of speculations about this topic, and we have brought Natalia on board just to speak to us a little bit from an investor's perspective and a financial advising perspective on how to navigate this. And today's topic is basically the development of the BRICS nations and how this will impact not only the dollar, but global markets. And before we kick today's conversation off, I would just like to thank Natalia for coming back and chatting to us. Natalia, thank you so much.
Thank you, Alexa. It's always such a pleasure to join you guys.
Such a pleasure to chat to you as always. And before we start today's conversation, Natalia, I'd just like you to give us a little bit of a background as to who you are, what your business does, and how you started your journey.
Absolutely. So as you said, I am a founder and CEO of New Gen Wealth Creation, which is a financial planning firm that is focusing on the affordable financial planning. I spent my career started in Boston, and after years in Boston, I moved to New York. I worked in Morgan Stanley as the portfolio management associate, syndicate coordinator, client service associate, and financial advisor. So I tried a lot of different spectrum of wealth management. And at some point, I decided that we do have a huge gap of financial planning for younger people who just starting, who don't have a lot of assets behind them, but they are ambitious, young, and they earn money. They just need a little bit guidance in the beginning. So that's why I started New Gen Wealth Creation. Myself personally, I came from Ukraine. So BRICS topic is very related to me. I know I've been following it significantly. I also come from the countries that are affected by the BRICS right now, by what's happening in Ukraine. And many years ago, about 13 years ago, when I was finishing college, I moved to Boston and I spent time in Boston, New York, and then now I live in Puerto Rico. So a lot of places moved around, but just like her Expat life, I am nomad and I enjoy to be part of this community. So I'm excited to talk about this topic and share some of my insight on the topic.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Natalia. And for those listening at home, if you are a member of Her Expat Life, if you are part of our membership program, you will not only get a discount with Natalia and the services that she offers, but also a discount with a range of our partners, which vary from co-living and co-working spaces globally. We have some legal partners on board. We have some financial advising partners like Natalia on board, life coaching, you name it, we have it covered. So visit herexpatlife.com to see a holistic view of what we can offer you as part of our membership program. But for today, let's just deep dive into this topic. I am a South African, so I agree with you that the conversation around the BRICS nations, the development of the BRICS nations, and how it's coming to the forefront is quite important to me personally. And I think to a lot of people, the impact of the development of the BRICS nations and how this is going to impact the global economy, I think is quite relevant for basically anyone and everyone who's looking to invest. So Natalia, let's kick off with the basics for those who are joining us who might not really know much about this topic. What is the BRICS group and how have their economies been growing in recent years?
Yeah, so BRICS is an acronym. It's standing for the nations like Brazil, Russia, India, China, and recently South Africa. They informally started to form themselves around 2006, and I think formally they kind of organized everything by 2009, and in 2010 that's when South Africa joined the board. Mm-hmm. It has been interesting to see their development, but what they're trying to do, they're trying to be an alternative to G7. And I think even though they've organized quite a long time ago, but we're talking now about them and we heard so much about them lately because of COVID and sanctions. And when it comes to doing the trades during the COVID, it was way more harder. There is way more sanctions to China. There is more sanctions to Russia. And based on that, they basically wanted to be heard more. They wanted to be a bigger player on the global stage. And we all know that when G7, they way more regulated, they have way more rules, they have way more requirements. So that's why a lot of items on the table, they in a way dictate. And if you want to deal with them, you kind of have to follow the rules. So that's why for the BRICS, it was very important to kind of start intensively working on their bloc to be heard and not being dictated on what they need to do or what they should do. So that's why they organize themselves. And I think it's very important to note that it's a baby stages of the bloc, and we have to always remember that. I know we talk a lot about this, but we'll talk more about specifics, but it's a very young bloc that still is fighting and evolving itself.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so that takes us to my next question. What have been the latest developments within the BRICS nations? So you've touched on these 5 nations that have basically started the BRICS, but there's been a lot of talk about different countries now wanting to join or looking to be a part of this group. So what is the latest news that we have on this?
Yes, so there is a last summit that they had. It was very interesting to watch. A lot of their agenda, it was in 2022, I believe, and I think it was that it was in person, but Russia couldn't attend because of the sanctions that was happening. Now, the topic at that point of time was a currency. They were talking very intensively about the new BRIC currency that will allow them to make a trade easier and less costly. Now, they have another summit in August. And on that summit, the 2022, they also were talking about the nations that want to join. And there's 19 nations they expressed interest in joining them. And some of them are very powerful, like Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates. If these countries join the BRICS, then there will be definitely a way louder voice of this bloc than it is right now. Mm-hmm. It's also very important to note the strength of each country that's right now in BRICS. China, if we look at the development of economy and just GDP, China is way higher than them. And that's why all those crazy numbers that we see, and the numbers are interesting. Everyone provides their own numbers. There's like no agreement on the number. But just to give you kind of like an average estimate of what I saw out there, BRICS itself presenting 43% of the world's population and about 13% of world's trade. While G7, which is the closest comparison we can do it, right? 10% of world's population, way lower, but close to 50% of trades and world's economy. So this is where, it's not there yet when it comes to becoming a huge player on the trading platform, economical platform. But when it comes to population, it's obviously so much overthrowing because obviously China and India. And those are the big players that needs to be considered in this global economy. So they were talking, the previous summit, they were talking about introducing those all new members because members express the interest. However, there's quite a few interesting points here. This upcoming summit, their agenda changed a little bit. They will talk less about the currencies. They kind of had a few issues when it comes to the currency over the past 6 months. But they also planning to talk about the requirements for nations to join them. It's very important to understand that if BRICS expands really quickly, it will get very heated for them and it will be very heavy for them to handle it. And that might affect their economy significantly, not in a good way. So they have to be very careful about their expansion. They have to have the set of requirements of who they end in as a member, why, and what's the whole purpose of BRICS behind itself, right? Yes, so their goal is to get away from the US dollar and from the West a little bit, so they heard more. But what are the specific benefits for themselves, like what they want to establish, what BRICS will bring to them, and how they can protect themselves from all the new nations that join in, because there's responsibilities comes with that new member, right? So that's something that I think they will be stressing a lot in this upcoming summit in August. And then another situation, the South Africa joined recently, and I know you probably know a lot about it, so I would love to hear your thoughts on that too. With the South Africa is part of the International Criminal Court. If you heard about the whole press and stories of Russia and Ukraine, for Russia, it's only one country in the BRICS that really wants BRICS to develop quickly. They want to move forward on so many different topics, and they want it, for them, it's pressing. They need it. They need it to survive economically. For other countries in BRICS, it's not. They want to be. They're way more patient. They are not in rush, and they want to be very careful. Now, in South Africa, the summit's supposed to happen in August in South Africa, but they are part of the International Criminal Court. Putin cannot come in, Russian president.
Yeah.
He wants to be there in person. It's very important for him to be there in person. And right now, after COVID, it is important for them, for G7 or for BRICS. It's important to be in person and present their country, right? So he really wants to be there, but he cannot because right now they have a legal right to arrest him. So there's a lot of tension out there, and I think it will affect, and it's interesting to see this upcoming summit and see what it will turn into and how they will go about it. Because I know there is talks that they might move it out from South Africa, but for South Africa, it is important to have it in there. So it's interesting to see, but it's definitely a lot of tension in BRICS right now, and I think they don't know exactly what they need to do about all those tensions.
Yeah. I don't know nearly as much as I should know about this topic, but following the news reports that are coming out of South Africa, I think our president, Cyril Ramaphosa, is in a bit of a difficult position because the alliances with the BRICS nations goes back quite a few years. It's relatively new, but it definitely goes back beyond the current crisis that we're seeing with the Ukraine and the situation that's happening there. And initially, this was developed to help advance developing economies. You know, it was done with the idea of creating a bit of a support system for these economies that were developing quite rapidly and found themselves in similar situations. And the narrative, it feels like it's changed and it's a lot more politically driven now. And I'm not sure what the decision will be, but I definitely can say that our president, Cyril Ramaphosa, is not in the easiest position because he has the West, obviously, pulling and expecting certain statements to be made on one end, and then obviously, you know, trying to look at the interests of the BRICS nations. So I think it will be an interesting thing to see how he manages this. I don't envy him. But I think that also, I don't know, I think maybe there needs to be a little bit of understanding as to this is an alliance that was formed way before the current crisis. So the West is putting a lot of pressure, but I think people need to understand this goes maybe a lot deeper than just this topic that's coming up now in relation to the war and support for Russia, or how that comes across. Yeah.
South Africa is a very hard position because they already have established economy ties with G7. So that's supporting their economy, right? So they don't want to ruin this and jump into BRICS. They want to be very careful about this. And a lot of new members that express interest, they have the same situation. So for those countries, it's very important to make sure that transition, and not even transition, I think it's very important to understand they are not rivals, BRICS and G7. They complement each other, and it's good to have both. It's not necessarily we should look at it, one is good, one is bad. No, I don't think so. I think it's a very good complement to development countries, and it's good to have ties with both. But just what BRICS wants to accomplish, the lower cost for some countries, it is a big deal. The cost, it is a big deal, right? A lot of the economical issues that the world is facing right now is caused by very high inflation and also high interest rates. Those interest rates might be a little bit lower if it's not tied to dollar. So there's a lot of different ways to look at it. But again, just like you said, South Africa is a very hard situation, and all eyes on it right now before August.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what the developments on that will be. I sense that there is a lot of tension around this topic back home. I'm sure that Mr. Ramaphosa is being pulled in various directions. It'll be interesting to see what the decision will be at the end of the day. But going back to discussion on basically trade patterns. Okay, so how has the economic growth of these BRICS nations impacted global trade patterns?
So there's good side of it, and there's maybe less good side of it. It is good for the countries that participate in because it's a lower cost. There's some issues that they ran into when it comes to trading and payments. So I know that, for example, China and some other country from BRICS, they swapped the debt, and that was a payment method. And I think that's why they're talking about the currency, because they've seen a lot of issues. But it's and then another reason, Russia and India, they had a problem to exchange payment because India could pay only with their currency, but then Russia couldn't really convert the Indian currency into Russian ruble or anything else, so they couldn't accept the payment. And so they're not, infrastructure there is not yet development for that very well, and they still need to work on how they're going to do it. The currency, what they proposed back at the time, it's not what European Union currency, euro. It's they want to have a currency on top of their local currencies. Also, for that, there should be infrastructure, right? It won't be that easy. And then I think none of the BRIC nations want to drop their local currency. So there is definitely no path to another euro for the BRICS, The trade itself, when they make trades, the new agreements, the ones that I looked at, they provide better costs. They are more cost efficient for them, and they stay away from the dollar. But then the infrastructure is not very good about that. For dollar, it is long-term risk that this will bring the devaluation of dollar. For average American, it's more expensive prices, right? So there's a positives and negatives that will affect it. But then again, I think there's this kind of like black and white on internet. There's like this black and white view. And I think it shouldn't be like that. I think it's okay for developed countries to create their own way of trading that makes sense right now for them. And as they develop, they will be wanting to participate with Europe and with US, and they will be ready for those trades and deals there. So it's really, you can look in the long term how it can devalue US dollar and weaken US dollar, but on another hand, it actually can help US and Europe over long term. So I don't know, I think there is way more colors there than just black and white.
Interesting, because if you're following the news on this and if you're following the media, it is painting the narrative that this is going to be the fall of the American dollar. That's very much how this is being painted, or how it's being reported to us. That I've even heard in podcasts and in conversations, people saying that this is going to be the fall of the American empire, basically. So do you think that this is being a bit too radical? Do you think that there's fear mongering happening?
I think the fear is definitely there. Just because of the way they talk about it and the way they present it on the media. I don't think, though, the numbers are there to support it. Again, when we look at the BRICS right now, it's in the beginning, in the baby stages. It has a lot to develop. In order for it to develop into the strong trading bloc, it has to be way more structure around it. Right now, it's kind of like an idea that they're trying to put in, and they still don't know how they want to do it, right? So this is the next meeting, and the following summits will be something that they will be thinking. They also understand adding new members right now will not be a smart way, because it puts them more pressure on them. Now, Russia might want it because they are in the distress, But I think other countries also have right to say, you know, we need to make sure we're doing it smart way, and we need to make sure we outline the path for the development of BRICS. And I think they should do that first before they jump into something. The same for the currency. There's a lot of talks about, you know, how they will create a different currency, how that will impact dollar. They're not there yet with a currency. And I don't think this upcoming summit we will hear much about currency as we heard on the past one. They need to outline the structure for the bloc itself before they continue to expand and develop. So it might take years and years before they gain that strength that everyone is talking about. But then again, I feel like for Europe and for US, this is an opportunity to not be in a, you know, the guy that being pushed away, but kind of like, how can I help? How can we support you guys? How can we work with you? You know, there's different opinions. So it's definitely right now, it's a lot of speculation. So you have to understand when you read news, when you listen to news, it's a lot of speculation out there, right? There's a lot of analysts that are completely against it. There's a lot of analysts that are more welcoming towards it. So I think we need to watch how it develops. We need to see them to develop, and they need to go through that process. There is no way of skipping it. And then for us, it's a matter of how smart we react to it and what we do about it to make sure that our economy doesn't fail.
Okay, so what role do trade policies and agreements play in the economic relationship between BRICS nations and the US in particular?
That's a good question. I think right now, not a good role, because last time when they did the last deal, it was such a big splash of negativity in the media. But again, just kind of what we discussed right now, it's I think it's not a bad thing for the countries that are participating in the trading deal, and those trading policies are still being developed. And I think for G7 or for US, it's really it's not yet a big of a hurt. A long term, it can cause a critical devaluation of dollar. But at that particular time, you know, what is the fear based on? The fear based on that BRICS will become so big and all the money will flow into BRICS and nothing will flow into US, right?
Yeah.
But I will argue there's a lot of amazing companies in the United States that have a huge international sale. We want to make sure that when we look into the countries, the companies, they do have international sales, right? So it's really hard to see that US or the dollar will fall. I don't think it's a very realistic predicament. It might get not as strong voiced on the global economy. That might be a case, but I don't think we will see something, you know, US empire will fall. I think it's a very, very one-way looking prediction that we are so far away from it right now.
Okay, and then related to this, and I know it's very difficult to answer this with any kind of certainty, but kind of based on what we know and what your perspective is, how might the US government respond to the economic rise of BRICS nations? And what implications might this have for US citizens?
I don't think they have been responding enough at all. I think right now the entire global economy is in a big distress when it comes to, you know, like post-COVID plus the war. So everyone is experiencing sort of close to recessions, slowdown in their economies. Europe, US, developed or not developed countries. It affected everyone, and everyone is experiencing the distress. And I think the US really didn't do much at all about BRICS. And I think at this point, they should not be doing too much because, again, BRICS is developing. They have to establish and outline their structure. And it's too early for G7, Europe and US to act on anything. I think they have to watch. They have to continue to participate. I think they should not be rivals, and they should not present it as rivals. And I don't see them doing it. I think the media does the most rivalry. So it's really hard to say what they need to do. I don't think they're doing much right now. What eventually, and I think what the fears are for Americans is that if US dollar weaken, the prices for Americans will become more expensive. Now, if a lot of Americans, when we go to Europe, we, like in some countries in Europe, not all of them, but in some countries of them, we will go and like, oh my gosh, for this $1, I can buy so much, while at home, I cannot buy much for it. So that might change, right? So might you like go to Europe or like other countries, and you might not be getting as much from your dollar as you hoped for in the past, or what we experienced in the past. So that's the implications, and like kind of like the ones that the average American will notice. And then obviously all of that will affect the companies, the US companies, the demand for their products, how much they export. And that's, again, if that's the case, if BRICS are becoming so big and US becoming weaker, dollar becoming weaker, for companies here, in order not to lose that momentum, they just need to participate in the trades, sell more, export more. There is a way for them to stay strong. It's just kind of fundamental approach to that.
Okay. You mentioned a little bit that the growth of the BRICS nations is not going to be such a straightforward or easy or linear process, that they need to also kind of regulate or be careful how to manage the growth within the BRICS nations themselves. So what challenges might the BRICS nations face as they continue to grow? If you could just talk a little bit more about why would it be so dangerous for them to grow exponentially at a rapid rate?
Yes. So for the trading bloc, when they create different policies, they have kind of like both side trades, right? And I just read about a few, for example, internally, if they participate in specific trades, they have to stick to our agreements and to some regulation and to some rate. Now, when some countries can put the high volumes of trades, others cannot. It's a huge mismatch in the size there too. A lot of new members might create the expansion to those countries higher or lower demand that they will not be able to meet. That can create the problems too. For others, it can trigger more export that the local economy will start failing. They will not be able to commit to the local markets and their outside markets. The exchange, the currency exchange, if they planning not to use the US dollar, right? So what they're using there right now, they're using their local currencies. Again, Russia and India ran into this problem that they cannot make a payment exchange because they cannot exchange their currencies, basically. Now that might happen between a lot of different countries in BRICS, and that's the issue. So they need to establish how we're making payments, that it actually works, and they need to not make it for each particular country trading between themselves. That will be a nightmare and definitely a failure. They need to create one way of doing it for all of them. And that's what right now, they're just not ready. It's a lot of building of infrastructure for those platforms to work the way they want it. And it will take time to do it, to make mistakes like what Russia and India ran into, fix it, and go about it, right? So again, it's not the same as your euro. It's very different. They want to have a currency on top of their local currencies. So there are a lot of different questions of what they can handle and what they cannot. Some countries can handle way less than others in the BRIC. And that's important to note too. So the structure and the requirements of the countries has to be outlined. And one analyst also pointed out that besides just being able to do trades away from West, there are some other ideas that they want to implement into BRICS. They want to make it bigger, not just a trade bloc. They want to make it more beneficial for the countries in the BRIC. What are those requirements? What are they trying to achieve? They don't know yet. They're still working on it. How they can benefit the new members, how they can benefit the members that are already in the bloc. This is all the questions that they didn't figure it out. So again, it's when we talk about them, it's very important to understand it's a new bloc, it's very young, it's developing, and new members who want to participate, they also will want some structure. What are we signing up for? We're interested in what you're doing, guys, but what are we signing up for? I want to see it on paper. I want to understand, right? And that's something that I think they will be working very heavily on over the next couple of years.
Mm-hmm. Okay, perfect. Let's zoom out a little bit and just talk about basically the current state of the global economy. So we've been focusing on the BRICS nations. We've been discussing a little bit what could be expected in the future with the developments that's going on there. But maybe let's discuss right now, as things sit, what is the current state of the global economy?
It's a huge slowdown for both developed and developing countries. The COVID, the war impacted a lot of countries. So right now it's, I know that we're talking about BRICS and it should be like towards those countries, but overall, all the countries and all the economies experiencing a huge slowdown. And within the BRICS, they experiencing their slowdown, right? When the BRIC was initiated, Russia was a big player at that time. And now Russia is in a huge economical distress for next decade or so. So that's no longer as a big player in BRICS as it wants to be. The same comes for Europe, experience a very heavy hit after COVID and with those banking crisis. America has also experienced a huge impact of the banking crisis recently we experienced, right? So I feel like we're all approaching this now soft landing. And there is a lot to be said of the future development of how we will stand up from this soft landing. And I think we are in this moment when there is a reset is happening. And it will take years for us to reset. It won't be as quick as some people think. It won't be as long, I think, as some people think. But I think for next 2 to 5 years, we will starting slowly to stand up and establish different path forward from what we experienced, COVID, post-COVID, the war. Now, this is a great opportunity for developed countries to stand up, but don't forget that for them, it was even more harder than for Europe or for US. They got hit way harder with this recession or this, pre-recession moment. So that's very important to know that while we are so afraid of US dollar to go, devalued, everyone got impacted right now. And I don't know if you heard, but like a lot of countries experiencing like even problems with like providing enough food. Like that's a problem right now in so many developed countries that before COVID we're doing fine. And actually there are a lot of investments coming their way. So, it's again, like the little stumps like this can create a huge impact on those economies. And I think it will be harder for developed countries to stand up as quick right now because they need to kind of reset their own economies and have the stability within them before they start developing again. So the growth, if you look at the charts on
Sorry, do you mean developing countries? Because I think you said developed. Developing countries.
Developing countries. So the growth for them will slow down, even though it was before COVID, it was way higher. For US and Europe, it slowed down too. So everyone is experiencing slow growth right now, or some even experience negative growth. It's everywhere, which is interesting to see, but also I think it's very natural after what we went through over the past 5 years.
Yeah. Okay, so on that note, what steps are being taken by central banks in advanced economies to prevent financial instability?
So right now, it's all they use monetary policy to make adjustments, and the all eyes are on inflation. For a lot of nations, inflation is number one. So everyone is trying to slow it down. It's very sticky right now. It's not there. It's not nearly where we want it to be in US, in Europe, in developing countries. But I think what the central banks want right now is to get that inflation lower. Again, with inflation comes the interest rate, and the high interest rate, it's all about lending, right? So for the developing countries to borrow is extremely expensive right now, which makes it even worse on them and on all of them. So it's not even, right, it's hard to say only about developing countries right now, because developed countries experience a very similar problem. It's just maybe different scales. But I think the number one target is inflation, and then obviously lowering interest rates. And I think that's what next 2 years we will do.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so this takes me to our next kind of stream of discussion, which is we've looked at the global narrative, what's happening with these countries, these nations, the state of the current global economy. As an investor, as someone who's looking to get into the investment space, what is the best ways to protect investments from the impact of not only the potential devaluation of the US dollar, which you have stated might be something that we're not going to see in the recent future, but just taking into account the current state of the global economy? How can people best protect their investments?
So diversification. In the past we talked with you about this. So when we build portfolio, when we invest, we make our models, we diversify, right? Diversification is extremely important when you invest in anything, because you're basically protecting yourself from different economical, political, sector or specific companies' issues. When that happens, you want to make sure that you build it towards the current economy. So right now, even though everyone is experiencing slowdown, US is still performing okay. There is a lot of Europe that performing really good too. And there is developing countries, some of them do perform better than others. So when you build a portfolio, you kind of have to structure it towards that. Let's assume we're talking about in the near future, BRICS is developing, is expanding. What do you do with your portfolio then? You have to adjust your investments towards what brings the most return. And if the BRICS countries developing, we want to step down. So you're not investing in countries itself. You can invest in their currency, but you want to invest in the companies within those countries that grow and that develop, right? So you need to do your research on what countries, what companies within those countries are doing really good, and invest in them. And that's a path for your portfolio, American portfolio, European portfolio, to kind of continue to be on that growth momentum while the geopolitical and geoeconomical global stage changing. It's all about that diversification and adding it. You cannot really put, right now, for example, I will say you cannot put a lot of eggs in the basket of BRICS, because it's a lot of uncertainty there and it's a lot of risk there. And you want to be very smart about what you do and what you invest in. And some companies might not survive it and others might survive it. So it's a lot of research drilled down to the specific company that you like the fundamentals, you believe in their future, and you think that they will perform well over the next decade or so.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so related to this previous question, what are your thoughts on this? Can investing in foreign currency or overseas markets help mitigate the impact of the potential or possible devaluation of the US dollar?
No, that will do exactly opposite. If the money is going away to another market, it helps devaluation rather than mitigates it. So it will work exactly opposite. But then again, I think what's extremely important to understand, if that were to happen, we still have a lot of companies within United States that have a huge percentage of international sales. Those companies, no matter what happens to dollar, will be doing just great because they have international sales, and they will be a participant of that foreign market momentum.
A question regarding, again, protecting portfolios. Should an investor consider investing in safe haven assets like gold or silver to safeguard investments from currency fluctuations? What are your thoughts on this?
I think it's a good idea. Just again, back to diversification, you want to have different sectors. You want to have different buckets in your portfolio, and investing in silver and gold always a good idea when it's a specific percentage of your portfolio, right? Again, if the BRICS is talking about creating a currency backed by some tangible asset. It could be gold, it could be silver, who knows? We don't know yet. But if they choose gold or silver, you will benefit it if you invested in it. So while yes, some exposure will be good, I don't think that's something as significant of a value in portfolio you should be putting in. If you have a lot of assets, you can put more higher percentage. If you have lower asset, I will say way smaller percentage to that. Again, I think when it comes to protecting yourself from the dollar, you just need to kind of like structure your portfolio and where is the growth. And very often silver and gold are very neutral until something is happening, right? So if you're actively trading, you have to get that momentum and take advantage of that momentum. But if you invest in, and that's what I suggest to majority of my clients, if you invest, you should invest long term. This way you can benefit on all the different events that happen in the world. Then your look will be a little bit different for silver and gold, and you don't really want to have that much exposure in it. Again, it's never bad to have it, just like, diversifying with real estate, with investments, with alternatives, with the cryptocurrency, but within a smart means.
Okay, perfect. And then my final question for you, Natalia, basically parting thoughts. Are there any specific industries or sectors that are more resilient to currency fluctuations and these developments that we see happening?
Not really. The only, I would say, sectors that always stand out, no matter what's happening, is what you use the most every day, what you cannot not to use. It's food, it's groceries, it's cosmetics, it's the cleaning, toiletry, all of that. Something that we cannot just stop using tomorrow because the currency or oil prices go up, right? We can stop driving or using oil, right, or gas because it's too expensive. We no longer can afford it. We cannot stop eating. So when you're thinking about what can protect you, I think the cyclical sectors like this, the defensive sectors, they are probably the best bet. But then again, when you structure your portfolio, you want to make sure that you are not overweighted in those sectors as well. It depends on the person itself. If you are young, having a huge exposure in those sectors might not be a good idea because you will lack on growth. You will add on to protecting your assets, but you will lack on the growth. And if you're closer to retirement and you actually don't want to see your money and your assets fluctuate like crazy, that's a good way to protect yourself no matter what is happening. Those are the sectors that always perform very stable comparing to other markets, just because, again, there is nothing we can do to stop using them. We're going to continue to use it no matter what's happening out there, right?
Perfect. Thank you so much, Natalia. That brings us to the end of today's conversation. It's always such a pleasure to speak to you and to get your insights about all things related to finance and investing. If people want to connect with you, where can people find you and how can people reach out to you?
Yes, it's Natalia at New Gen Wealth Creation. You can find me on LinkedIn, on the social media like TikTok and Instagram. It's at New Gen Wealth Creation, one word. You can reach out to me there. you can always email me too. It's info@newgenwealthcreation.com. And if you have just any questions about your portfolio in general, or you need to review your portfolio, I definitely can help with that. Again, it's all about the analytics behind your portfolio in the current environment. And right now, I will say that as a goodbye gift, it's very important to be extremely picky rather than participating in the cookie cutter models or the indices, because again, the economy is very neutral right now, and we don't know when there's another hike, when there's another drop in the market. You just want to be way more tactical nowadays when it comes to your investments.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much, Natalia. Thank you for sharing your thoughts with us. And I look forward to having you back on again to discuss future developments and see how things progress.
Thank you. It's always a pleasure, Alexia. Thank you so much for this important conversation.
Yeah. Thank you to our viewers at home. Thank you for joining us today. We really hope that this video provided some insight into what's currently happening. Please feel free to leave some comments below, share your thoughts if you enjoyed our conversation. If you have any questions, any follow-up questions that you'd like us to deep dive into, if there are any other topics in general that you'd like us to discuss related to the world of having a global lifestyle and being a global citizen, please do share your thoughts. Make sure to click subscribe so that you can be notified to any new videos that we post. We are always chatting to leading experts like Natalia and others in various industries. So make sure you don't miss any of our content. Visit herexpatlife.com to research and check out our membership program, which again offers you discounts throughout our various partnership deals that we have. And also make sure to follow us on social media. We look forward to keeping you updated as this and other developments progress, and we will see you soon. Thank you, Natalia.
Thank you. Have a great day.